to start. My name is Bryce Schroeder.
I'm Jose Gonzalez.
And I'm Nicholas McQuillan.
And we are here today on May 9th interviewing Mr.
Bob Kult, K-U-L-T. Okay, I was born in 1940 in West Allis, second oldest of 7 children. I went to kindergarten at Franklin in West Allis and grade school at St. Rita's from 1946 to 54. I went to high school at Marquette University High School from 54 to 58. And then I went to college at Marquette University from 58 to 62. College of Business, accounting major. I then went to graduate school at Marquette and received an MBA in 1965. During the mid to late 50s, I had Journal and Sentinel routes, and that's been changed, so now we have adults doing that starting in 1994. They have to be age 18 with a driver's license. In 1954 to 56, when I was 14 to 16, I worked at a shoemaker after school and Saturdays. And then in 56, I started working at a hardware store through high school and college for 6 years. I earned enough money to pay for my college tuition at Marquette. High school tuition at Marquette was about $300, and the university was $1,000. I just checked that out today, and the closest I could come was 1968, 10 years after I graduated, and Marquette U tuition was $1,475. So it went up roughly $500 in 10 years. That's when the increases were pretty modest. I met my future wife, Laurel, at Milwaukee City Hall in the tax commissioner's office where she worked. I worked there part-time for 1 semester as part of my MBA program. The city of Milwaukee hired, I think it was 8 people, 1 for each department. So somebody approached me and I said, yeah, I'll do that for 1 semester because I was writing my essay. So 2 years later, 1966, she and I got joined in marriage at St. Bernadette Church on the north side of Milwaukee. We have 4 sons, Marquette High School graduates, and 1 daughter, Wauwatosa East graduate. Chris, Greg, Pete, Andy, and Ann. And this year, they will turn 56, 54, 52, 50, 48. Easy to remember. If you add that up, you get 260 years of kids. Then after I graduated in 65 from graduate school, I worked at a CPA firm, Alexander Grant & Company. And we were considered the number 9 firm in the country after the Big 8. I worked on the audit staff and got excellent training in those 3 years. I couldn't say enough for it. We were a relatively small office in Milwaukee, so I got out on a lot of jobs at an early date. And I became licensed CPA in 1968. I worked 1 year at a construction company who ended up going out of business, not because of me though. And then I worked at Dataforms from 1970 to 97. We manufactured business forms. I thoroughly enjoyed that. We had a couple hundred employees between a plant here in New Berlin and 1 in Minneapolis. So I was in charge of the accounting, personnel, and a few other things. A big corporation bought our company in 95, so I ended up a couple more years and left. At that same time, 97, our first grandchild was born down in St. Louis, Spencer. After 3 weeks, they found out he had some birth defects. So for 5.5 years, he had 3 open heart surgeries, heart transplant, and then he passed away in 2002. So that was really tough on the kids and our other children and my wife and I. From 99, 2 years later, to 2012, we have 10 more grandchildren born. They're all doing fine. They're between 9 and 24. Going back to 1940 when I was born at Kegel's Inn, German restaurant in West Allis on 59th and National. Second oldest of 35 grandchildren. We lived in an upstairs apartment there. I guess my mom didn't expect me that day that I was born at home, so here I was. We lived there a couple years and bought a house on 85th and Grant. My grandpa, John Kegel, started the restaurant in 1924. So next year will be the 100th year, excuse me, the 100th year. They're known for some pretty fine German food, especially the boneless duck. Now, I happen to like duck. Now, I don't eat it a lot, a couple times a year maybe, but I've never had anything quite like it. It's pretty unique. So, this is my second cousin, Julian Kegel, fourth generation, has been there for maybe 3 years now. He took it over. So, we moved to 85th and Grant in about 42 and lived there for 10 years till 1952. We lived a block away from Franklin School where we went to kindergarten, and my brother and I went there every day to play baseball, about a block and a half away. We ice skated there in winter. They flooded the playground. And the other playgrounds in West Allis, Jefferson, Washington, plus Franklin, all had 1 or 2 full-time employees there all day, evening. So us kids had plenty of supervision, which I suppose we took for granted or didn't think about as kids, compared to what's happened over the years when a lot of those either got closed or just don't have staffing like that. In 1952, we moved to 55th and Burnham in West Allis. My dad worked for a furnace company, and he bought the business in 1952. But he pretty much worked alone. My older brother Marty, 1 year older, and I participated in a lot of speed skating, ice skating. We had a lot of races at Washington Park. I don't imagine they still do that, I don't know. And playgrounds in West Allis. We ice skated at the Mayfair Mall ice rink, which was open from 1973 to 86. That was very popular. But then they remodeled and expanded and closed that up. We did a little bit of roller skating at the Palomar on 27th Street in Milwaukee, and also at later years, St. Pius roller rink on 76th off of Center. I think that's still going. So much of this in the 40s, before TV came, there were just a lot of things we did, inside, outside. So we went to movie theaters on Saturdays, probably cost a quarter or dime or something, to Paradise and West Allis theaters, primarily in the late 40s and early 50s. We went to a number of drive-ins with our kids, a fair amount of times. Again, that was at the beginning of TV coming along. Softball. We saw Eddie Feiner called the king in his court, softball pitcher. He had only 4 players, him, catcher, first base, and shortstop. I kid you not. I looked at a video today. I found it at home or on the computer. We probably went right after he got started in 1946, and he did this till he was 70. He traveled probably the world, like the Harlem Globetrotters. He was considered the fastest pitcher all time in softball, 100 miles an hour. The thing I remember, and when I saw that video today, I thought, oh my gosh, I can remember that. I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old. But he had trick wind-ups, a lot of trick plays. He would wind up 3, 4, 5 times and then fire the ball around his back, right over, strike, fast. Yeah, But those were the kind of attractions. My dad took us to a lot of that stuff, probably because we were the two oldest, Marty and I, a year apart. So he got us into baseball, ice skating, and then some of these other attractions, so to speak, entertainment. Telephone. We had I mentioned this to some of our grandkids. I said, hey, we had a party line telephone. A what? I said, there's other families. I think maybe 5 or 10 we had back in, well, even 52 when we moved, we had one. They were pretty common with telephone operators. And I read something about that. That persisted for quite a long time. Some people, party lines. We listened to the radio, a lot of programs. My mom liked that in the 40s. Get in the bedroom and listen to the radio for whatever program. Some of them were mysteries and things like that. We got our first TV in the early 50s, black and white, naturally. It had a large magnifying glass in front of it, maybe a couple inches, as I can visualize, in front of the TV, just to make the picture a little larger. I don't remember how much TV we watched. I don't think we watched a lot, and there probably wasn't a lot anyway back then. We went to a lot of games at Borchard Field and County Stadium. Borchard Field, my dad took us. Sometimes we took the bus when we were a little bit older. They closed that in 52. My wife grew up right across the street, and she said when they had home runs, the personnel from the park would go out and chase after the ball. It wasn't free baseball like today. But we did go to Borchard Field and County Stadium starting in 53. I was telling somebody about that. We used to sneak in the windows for a couple of years, the outside windows, boost each other up, and then we'd be in the bathroom, and then we'd check the door and see the guard sitting on a chair and slowly walk out. But we probably went to, I would guess, 10, 12 games a year. I don't remember what we paid, but it was nominal, relatively speaking. My wife and I had season tickets for Marquette basketball games, Marquette U, for 25 years, from 62, 63 until about 87 at the old Milwaukee Arena. I can remember doing some shopping, going with my mom on the bus to the old Schuster's, Gimbel's, Goldman's on Mitchell Street. All of those are closed. Goldman's had licorice chunks. I happen to like licorice, black licorice. They had big chunks. A guy told me about it that I worked with at the hardware store, and among other things. I mentioned that to Laurel just today, and she said, I used to go there. I said, from the north side, you went to Mitchell Street? I said, you don't like licorice? The other place, Johnson Cookies, had a factory or a building on National, maybe 48th Street or 50th. And occasionally, we would go there and get large bags of cookies for like dollars, I recall. And since we had 7 kids, my 6 siblings I had, we went through the cookies pretty fast. We shopped at A&P, grocery stores, Kohl's, all gone. Fruit Ranch, 75th and Blue Mound, long gone. Dutchland Dairy and Moyer Bakery for their tubs of chicken. Fanny Farmer Candy, gone. Buddy Squirrel, gone. So there was just a lot of the smaller stores, like some of those, and closed up. We rode the streetcar over Miller Valley. I don't remember where we were going because it would end up in West Allis. I think it went to 70th and Greenfield, as I recall. And that closed up in 1958. I was reading about that. They never had an accident. That's remarkable. 1892 to 1958, that long. I can recall driving to Chicago to buy oleo. which became legal. Yellow oleo became legal in Wisconsin in 1967. So back when I worked at the hardware store in 56, I started, age 16. I heard a lot of adults talking about that. Drive to Chicago, buy the oleo, put it in the trunk, lock it up, don't get caught, blah, 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 blah. And I think to myself now, oh, wow, how times have changed. We used to visit the domes at Mitchell Park a long time ago. So as the years went by and I read about or saw on TV all the problems they're having structurally, I thought, oh, what a shame. I don't know what the answer is. We went to the botanical gardens at Whitnall Park a lot with our children. One time we took a tree hike at Grant Park, back when the Milwaukee Journal used to do some really neat stuff. They featured 3 or 4 county parks and tree hikes, and they showed maybe 25 trees where they were. They gave exact distance. Go 142 steps to this tree. And so we did that at Grand Park, which was really nice. Did it a couple times. We went to Door County frequently, Horicon Marsh, Sault Ste. Marie, Disney World a couple times. And I remember the Washington Park Zoo in Milwaukee, and when I see pictures of that on a relatively small space, I think, I don't know how they did that. That boggles me. We have vacationed at Lake Delton in the Dells, starting in 1979, 21, 31, 41, 44 years, maybe missed one. And we even went years ago when the lake washed out and it was no lake. Our 5 kids come every year and all the grandkids, so we have 22 of us. We get, there's a place we go now for about 8 years, has 8 rental units, so it's really compact and secluded. In 1954, I started bowling with my dad in the St. Rita Holy Name League. And I bowled at Marquette here. We started bowling sophomore, junior, senior year. We bowled at the Eagles Club on the Avenue. My wife and I bowled in a couples league at St. Pius Parish in the 70s. And one time our bowling team from the St. Rita League was on the TV show, The Bowling Game. I don't remember how we did. Milwaukee was known as the bowling capital of the world from 1905 to 2008. And that's because the ABC, American Bowling Congress, was located here pretty much all those years. My wife and I saw a lot of live entertainment over the years, many years ago. And that included Ray Charles, John Denver, Jose Feliciano, Johnny Mathis, the Mills Brothers, Oak Ridge Boys, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and the Shirelles. We saw Peter, Paul, and Mary at the Market Center many years ago when they called it that. And we were going across that bridge from the parking lot to the theater, and we happened to see their limo out on, I don't know, Wells or Kilbourne. I could not believe it. I still can picture that, the longest limousine I ever saw in my life. Extra, extra long. I don't know how it turned the corner. It was longer than a semi. Now, I grew up in West Allis back in, until I got married. We lived on 85th and then 55th off of Burnham till 1966, the year we got married. So I did a lot of activities there. My dad took us to a number of sporting events. West Allis was noted for its outstanding baseball teams in the past years. They had a team called Highway Beer Depot, Tanner Paul Legion team, and Nathan Hale High School. Some individuals who made it to the majors were Harvey Keene, Detroit Tigers, shortstop. He's in the Wisconsin Athletic Hall of Fame, but not the other one. Don Pavletic, Cincinnati Reds. He played behind Johnny Bench. Good luck. Bob Botts, he pitched a little for the Los Angeles Angels. But I remember all three of them. Harvey Keene used to come down to Franklin and hit fungos to us, which as a little kid, they seemed to be a mile high. West Allis was noted for its West Allis Girls Classic Softball League in 1949. West Allis was named the skating capital of Wisconsin, and that's because their speed skating club won so many races. Now, I was aware of some of that, and I guess I didn't know that didn't go on in other cities. I didn't know baseball was so big in West Allis. And when I got older, I found out Tex Bellick, Steve Bellick, who was single most of his life, he was at Franklin every day. He coached at Hale, Tanner Paul, and he coached us when we were 6 and 7 years old. And he would say something like, "You want to steal? Go steal." No signals, none of that stuff. Just taught us baseball in his own way. And his brother, Emil, was a scout for the Braves way, way back. And what I had heard was Bellick and a fella at Fairview on 68th and Lincoln and a couple others really got some clout in the city to spend money on sports, like the ice skating rinks, all the playgrounds, the staffing. And so maybe I got really spoiled, because when our kids grew up and we went to some playgrounds where we lived, like Center Street, they eventually closed the playground, the little park, no more ice skating, the building wasn't open anymore, just things like that. West Allis is home to the Pettit National Ice Center. I guess I read that's one of two places in the country like it. State Fair relocated to West Allis in way back 1892. And the racetrack there is the oldest motor speedway, supposedly, in the country, 1903. Now, I have a picture here. You have a zoomer? This is a picture of our daughter Ann in 1991. I read an article in the Journal about this tree, Greenfield Park. Pretty good directions. So I went out there myself. Then I took her and my wife. It's called a peach leaf willow. It's 33 feet circumference. So that'd be about 12-foot diameter across. And just standing there looking at it, it's not very high. So I thought, well, that'd be the largest tree that they know of, but they even said in the country. I went out there maybe 7, 8 years ago with our daughter's son, our grandson Ryan, who's 16 now. The tree went, fell apart. Old age like me. But anyway, seeing that day, just walking through the little clump of woods, is about a block wide only, was something else. Now, getting back to the 40s and early 50s, I can't say enough about the 40s in terms of, again, before TV. The stuff we did with my dad, mainly because my mom was home with more kids coming along, he didn't do that much in the other kids because he had the business, he had more children. Us older ones were starting high school. The youngest one, my sister, after 6 boys, she was born 16 years after me. So we had quite a range there. In that first house on 85th Street, we had a skee-ball machine in the basement. Now, I don't think too many people ever had a skee-ball machine, but my dad would be the kind of guy to get one. And we played a lot. And occasionally I see a machine someplace, like traveling, vacation, and I like to play a couple games. Burma-Shave. I mentioned that to our son, who's going to be 50 tomorrow. He said, "Dad, what's that?" I said, "Burma-Shave signs?" He said, "Andy, I'll get you this book." From 1925 to the 60s, they had 7,000 sets of signs in 45 states. We saw them a lot because we didn't have interstates. We'd go out Highway 18, 45, 41. When we traveled, we didn't travel a lot, but we did with my dad. We went out to a lake cottage, which I'll talk about later, frequently, 40 miles southwest, Palmyra. And we would see the Burma-Shave signs, invariably of 2 or 3 on every trip. So one man that started this, he wrote all of these. So here's one. Big mistake many make. Rely on horn instead of a brake. They're short, and they're maybe 5 signs. And the last one is Burma-Shave. It was a brushless shaving cream. It might have been the first. Speed was high, temperature hot. Tires were thin. X marks the spot. So there you are. So that was before interstates. Now the other thing, again, before TV with us kids, we played a lot of games outside. Like, I think every night we went out to play for a while. I don't even remember some of these, what we did. Pom-pom pull-away, blindman's bluff, Andy over, throwing a ball over the garage, tag, hide and seek, marbles. Played a lot of marbles. I don't know if marbles exist anymore. I suppose they do. We did a lot of bike riding. And then if it was raining, rainy days, play canasta, rummy royale, checkers, chess. We had an electric football game we played a lot. And I think they still have those where they vibrate and you go down the field. We still have, my wife and I have at our house, a basketball game that shoots a ping pong ball. And there was 3 distances, a short one, free throw, and then a long one. 2 of the, 1 free throw, 2 of the other ones. So there was 5 spots. And the ball would just kind of roll. It had little ridges in the platform. And then a lever on the side, 3 on each side. I checked and checked and checked. I couldn't find the game anymore. But a lot of games have been discontinued by companies. Now, when our grandkids come over, when they're young, they like to play that game. They still do. Go down and get the basketball. And we did a lot of trading of baseball cards. I don't know whatever happened to mine. They're long gone. My brother and I took accordion lessons from about age 8 to 13. And on 85th Street, when we were 8 and 9, 10, we went across the street to the old Nathan Hale, which is now Central, and watched basketball on Sundays for, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. They had muni leagues, former college players. They probably charged a dime to get in, but good basketball. We did that a lot. In 7th and 8th grade, I was a cadet at St. Rita, crossing guard. And I think adults have taken that over too, probably. I don't see kids do that anymore. I had kind of an embarrassing moment in 7th grade basketball. I was shooting a free throw at Horace Mann Junior High, and I took my shot and went over the backboard, up into the balcony, and you never heard so much laughter. And the game had to be stopped until somebody could go up the stairs, like we went up the stairs or the elevator. Go up the stairs in the balcony, get the ball, and come back down with the ball. So I'm sitting there, oh man, what a crawl in the hole. Again, before television and pro sports, high school football and basketball, or mainly football, were really popular and crowded. We used to go to West Allis Central Field on 75th and National, and they used to cover the fence because it would be a sellout, and it seemed like half the city went there to watch games. I was at some high school football games upstate. One in particular was Manitowoc. The year that they had a couple of guys make it in Wisconsin, they were just top. They had like, I think it was 80 games in a row they won, Manitowoc High School, 60 or 80. Anyway, I went up there one Friday night in the pouring rain, and my wife said, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to a football game." "Where?" "Manitowoc, 80 miles. Well, seeing was believing. I got there half hour early, and the place was absolutely packed. I got a seat, and happened that Ray Nitschke was sitting in back of me a couple of rows, and some guy kept asking him questions. He finally got tired of it, got up and moved. But I asked somebody, "You get this kind of crowd all the time?" He says, "Yeah." "Manitowoc?" "Well, first of all, we have good football, but Friday night, we don't have Brewers and Bucks and Packers and all that stuff. We have high school." And he said, "That's true of so many communities when you think about it." I said, "Yeah." The other thing we did a lot of, again, that same time frame, 40s and early 50s, we went and visited a lot of lakes. Danoon, Silver Lake, Golden Lake, Lake LaBelle, Beulah. Probably my parents took turns, and then some of my aunts and uncles and cousins would go. And it seemed that we went every other Sunday in the summer. In 1950, Grandpa Cagle had a house built on Blue Spring Lake in Palmyra. And we started going there every Sunday from about 50, 51, all the way up until the 80s. And then we started going with our kids, most Sundays. It was about 40 miles. And then a lot of my cousins went. Those 35 cousins, I think all but one family went out quite a bit. Another thing that was very popular back then was horseshoes and pool or billiards. I heard a lot of men talk about that. And again, it was before television. My dad bought a 9-foot pool table in 1954 for $75 from a guy that owned a drugstore. It was an antique table made by Brunswick. So we had it at his house in the basement, and we played a lot during high school and college. My dad gave me the table in the 1970s when we bought our first house in '69. And then eventually we moved, and our daughter Ann has it now, but it's not set up, and I don't know if it will get set up, but there you are. Spent a lot of time shooting pool. So this one's headed trips, travels, vacations. Disney World, we went in 1980 the first time. The Magic Kingdom was the only park open. We took our 5 kids. So I made a reservation and for 6, because I guess I read something about that. And then I, being an honest guy, I called back a week later and changed it to 7. I got canceled immediately. Oh man, I gotta lie. So I called back a week later and said 6. When we got down there in the station wagon with a car top carrier, the 4 boys were in the middle seat, all the gear in the back plus on top. And the 4 boys had their feet out, and Ann was on the floor with a blanket over her. And this young lady that checked us in or through the gate, I kid you not, she's looking and looking and looking. I thought, oh my gosh. Well, she didn't do anything more. She didn't inspect or anything. So we got in there. And we stayed in a trailer back when they had trailers. That was really nice, air conditioned. It was July. And I know when we got out of the trailer at 8 o'clock in the morning, within 5 minutes I was soaking wet. It was so hot and humid. But we had a thoroughly enjoyable time, 2.5 days in the Magic Kingdom and I think a half a day at River Country. and that was satisfactory. When we went in '87, 3 of the kids, the 2 older didn't go. We stayed, and I think we stayed at the Polynesian place. And then Epcot was open, so we stayed like maybe 5 days. We went all the way to 2010, 13 years ago, and our son Andy invited my wife and I to go with him and his wife and 2 daughters. So we did, and we stayed 6 or 7 days because they had those other 2 parks open. Kettle Moraine State Forest, the north and southern unit, we've been there countless times, sometimes hiking, mainly driving. Horicon Marsh, we used to go a lot, driving, hiking. They got a real nice boardwalk. Way back in '85 and '86, I took, I think, all of our boys out to the College World Series in Omaha. They used to play at Rosenblatt Stadium for many years. Now they got a new stadium, downtown Omaha. Mackinac Island, 1982. We went up there for a little trip, and it was July 4th. We got off the boat, and lo and behold, here on the shore there was rock skipping, stone skipping. What the heck is this? Well, they had teams. They had an individual and then other support staff, like reminded me of the Indy 500. They all had the same kind of uniform. And they're in the water. I'm left-handed throwing, skipping these rocks. Oh, we stayed here for a while. Well, since then, I found out Mackinac Island is about the top place of any for stone skipping. There's just something about that particular area and the waves. So here's what the information says on the internet. The record for skips at Mackinac is 33 in 2017, as of 2017. 33 skips. And I'm picturing that because we used to skip rocks a lot. I see the Guinness record, this is really hard to believe, 88. So I looked on the computer, the video, and they showed a rock. 88, they had them all numbered. And they also said somebody threw one over 300 feet, length of a football field. I don't know, 112 meters or something. I can't even imagine that. That's hard to believe. One last trip. Our son Greg, who's the second oldest, he played a lot of baseball. He played here at Marquette, and when he played, Marquette was spring, later summer, now spring, and Tulsa East was summer. And back then, the public school could have 2 kids on their team from private schools. So he played on Tulsa East in summer. And he and I were the real baseball nuts in the family. So he said, Dad, we've talked about it. I'm going. If you want to go with me. The Hall of Fame. So we went in 2001, and he treated me, so we flew out there, went to the Hall of Fame. We spent the whole day and covered it in one day. And then the next day we went to Yankee Stadium. And I don't save a lot of souvenirs, but I saved that one because it was memorable. I got all the tickets and stuff. I see I kept score, but I used to do that at the Brewer games when I was a kid. I really liked doing that. And I had no occasion to get up and leave my seat for anything. So I probably never missed any. I knew the Hall of Fame was pretty exclusive, and when I read that Harvey Keene is not in the Hall of Fame, I thought, okay, well, he didn't play that long. He had some health problems. Then he managed the Brewers or Braves. Out of more than 22,000 men who have played Major League Baseball, about 269 are in the Hall of Fame. 1%. That's pretty small and exclusive. I don't see many buses around anymore. When I went to grade school at St. Rita's, Marquette High, and Marquette used some years that I didn't have a car, some I did. The buses ran probably every 10 minutes, 15 at the longest, like clockwork. If it was 8 o'clock, it was 8 o'clock. So when we lived on 85th Street, we took the bus from 84th and Lincoln to 60th for 8 years. Marquette High, 55th and Burnham to 35th, and then 35th across to Wisconsin Avenue. I would usually leave the house at the same time, whatever it was, down at the corner, half a block for high school. Wait about a minute or two, here's the bus. It was perfect. And I don't know what it is like today, I have no idea, but I'd be surprised. And when I went to Marquette in 54 to 58, we attended Mass daily. We bowled at the Eagles Club, I mentioned. And then we had demerit cards. I think it was after 5 you had to go to jug. And maybe a full card, which I never enjoyed, was 30 demerits. And then you got in some real trouble. I showed you that little chart I had in 1958. 34 Jesuits, 9 laymen, 43 teachers. 50 years later, 2008, in that directory I got, alumni directory, which is really well done. 6 teachers were Jesuits, 41 laymen, and a new category, 23 lay women, for a total of 70 teachers. So I have no idea how many teachers are at Marquette today, but that was a big change in 50 years. I had mentioned this event. I was very familiar, have been, with WISA, W-I-S-A-A, Wisconsin Independent Schools Association, and then the current one, WIAA. And I do remember when there were 2 state champions, because WISA was 1968 to 99, after I graduated from high school. So for 32 years, excuse me, there's 2 state champions. And there was a lot of people you argue both ways, I guess. But the point was, I think WISA started going down in population, number of schools, and number of schools with, say, football, I know that decreased. But then what I found was, and I didn't know this, there was a predecessor, WCIAA, Wisconsin Catholic Interscholastic Athletic Association, is established in 57, the year before I graduated from high school. So they changed that name in 1968, 11 years later, to WISA. And then after 32 years, WISA dissolved and schools joined WIAA. So that probably was a good thing after all was said and done. It's probably nostalgia. Our dear daughter Ann gives me a calendar every year, and I have it on my desk, hanging up, I should say, next to my desk, so that I flip the page every month. And this was one she took at the Dells last year, I guess, of our 10 grandchildren, and my wife and I. And I looked in the basement. I have 25 years of these, so that's pretty memorable. The green sheet. I told you I'm not a big saver, a little bit. I have, I don't know how many pictures. I have 42 albums of pictures, mainly of the kids when they're little. Here's the last green sheet the journal published. And you notice it's bigger? Cut the size a little bit here. So they said, okay, we're cutting out the green sheet way back in '94. You wouldn't believe how many people complained. I mean, that was really a big thing. And it had been around, I guess I didn't write it down, for a long 80-year history. And then somebody comes along and says, no more. It costs too much money, probably, is what they were saying, to get green paper. Well, this one is all green, just a lot of stuff, which a lot of people enjoyed. And my wife does the crossword puzzles and the Sudoku now. That lasted longer than I would have guessed, till 2015. So 6 and 15, 20 years, 21 years, a lot of complaining. Finally, somebody else joined the company and said, all right, enough's enough. We're going to have a sheet, white paper, but we'll put a little green on it, just one sheet. It's better than nothing, and we'll call it the green sheet. And we'll put the puzzle in and the funnies and so forth. So, and I also remember that when they did this, that they shrunk it because they said they were going to. I would guess in the whole country the green sheet was pretty darn unique to Milwaukee. And then we have the Limerick Hall of Fame in Greendale, Wisconsin. Speaking of Hall of Fame, the idea of limericks was started in 1846. Some people say it was invented by the Irish soldiers in the 1700s. My home was once claimed by a mouse, so I set traps all over the house. The hunt sadly ended. I hadn't intended to catch the big toe of my spouse. Now I happened to, I've read all these, I looked up some more on the internet, and I saw some of those are pretty good. A lot of people sent these in. And this book, Greendale, is published by a man named Roy Riemann, who used to own a publishing company in Greendale, and he sold the business eventually to Reader's Digest way back. He's about late 80s now, so still going strong. He had all these travel magazines, household, cooking, all kinds, about maybe 15 different magazines. And he developed Greendale, the main drag, all the stores on the side, a lot of it's his doing. So anyway, he published this some years ago, among other things. And there you are. Now, my dear wife and I, she likes to golf and bowl. I've marked them all. We've played over 100 courses in the state of Wisconsin, public courses. There's about 400, a little over 400. So we played over 100, which is a lot. And then I've played maybe 10 more than her. We fortunately got out the last 3 years. We didn't go for a couple of years due to some ailments, but the last 3 years we played, not a lot, but maybe 6 to 10 times. So I'm really hoping to get out this year, but we'll see. Now, one thing that I was really fortunate, when our children attended schools from 1971 to 93, 20-some years, I had a job at the printing company and 2 bosses, but mainly one, that I could leave whenever I wanted to. And I probably attended 99% of all the kids' activities from kindergarten through high school. So every Marquette High football game, baseball game, soccer game, I was there. My wife too. And same thing with kindergarten, plays, one thing after the other. And one of our boys said to me, Dad, so-and-so, a real good friend of his dad was a doctor. And he said, all he did was work. And he never, in 4 years, never got to see his son play football, for instance. And I said, oh, well, there's a lot of people in that boat. I know a couple guys, attorneys, that just worked a lot and didn't get to go, including kids at Marquette. So anyway, when I think about it, at that time, I knew I was really fortunate, and because there's a lot of games, there'd be a couple parents, not many. Just, they had to work. They had other stuff to do. So our kids played baseball, basketball, football, soccer, softball, and volleyball. Drum lessons, drums, piano, saxophone, and then scouts. So most of those activities we were able to attend. And as far as Marquette High sports, I didn't go to a lot of sports events after I graduated, and then worked. Then I got married and had little kids until after the kids got through school. So probably starting in the mid-'80s until about 2018. I was figuring I probably went to about 30 games every year as a fan. Football, mainly football, basketball, some baseball, and soccer. I went to the championship football game in Madison in 2009 when Marquette beat Menominee Falls, 7-0. They were expecting a bigger score because the preliminary games, Marquette scored 35, I think, 4 games in a row. It was just one of those years. But it was a real good match. And then I started having more difficulty walking, so I haven't been to very much at all. My wife and I went to Ann's son, Ryan, sophomore, at Brookfield East, soccer games, but that's pretty short walk, so we've been enjoying that. So I think I've covered what I intended to. Amen.
All right. We have a couple of questions.
Yes.
How did your high school experience at Marquette compare with your son's experiences?
I think just progress. One big one was the retreat. What's it called? Kairos? When our boys went to high school, participated. In fact, Greg, who's 54, he's an attorney in Indianapolis. Now he's on his own. He worked for some big firms, but he broke off. And he's in healthcare. I guess it's a real niche. He was telling me very recently about his experience with a boy when he went to a school, befriended this kid, and it was so touching. And I thought, oh man. And just a month ago, Greg's son, Alex, who's a junior at Brebeuf in Indy High School, was making his retreat. And Greg said, would you and Mom send him a letter, send it to the school, I'll give you a name. And they'll give it to him then during the retreat. Okay, so that I would say is a big change from the retreats that I made. Well, certainly more classes, advanced classes of all kinds, like math and, well, pretty much the gamut, I guess, from what I've heard. And in fact, I hear Greg talking about that. He said, Dad, I have no idea what this stuff is. And he was top student too, but things change. And that would probably be the big ones that I could think of.
What was your time in the military like?
I joined the Air National Guard probably the second year of graduate school, so as not to get drafted. Plus, I went to weather flight school. I went one day at Mitchell Field and observed. And I got a little appreciation for the vagaries of trying to forecast the weather. Now, my wife watches the weather all the time. I don't. I never do. And, well, I take what I get, I guess. And the thing is, in that little stint I had down there at Mitchell Field, people come in and change stuff, put a new chart on the wall, change the pattern. And a couple of the weather people that I occasionally hear talking, if I happen to be in the room and the weather's on, which she's watching, occasionally the person will say, we really don't know which way this is going to go. 2 inches of snow or 10. They don't do that a lot. In my experience, it's the one that says 10 and people get all blah, 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 hypered up. So, that was the intent. I was going to go to school in, I guess it was Colorado, weather flight school. So I went to basic training 6 weeks, and in the 6th week, I was doing some exercises out in the drill pad, wearing a back brace, and the sergeant saw me and really got upset and sent me back to the barracks. The next day I came out, same thing. I thought he was going to slug me. I went to the hospital, they took x-rays and sent me home and told me, do not look in the envelope at our reports and make sure you wear your uniform. So go back to Mitchell Field and talk to the colonel, who was very upset that the doctor passed me. Coincidentally, so that was my experience in the Air National Guard / Air Force, honorable medical discharge. Coincidentally, my internist of 15 years, 20 years, Dr. Michelle Shop, she knows I have a lot of back pain, which I started at 18, like your ages, and I wore a brace a lot of years on and off. I take some pain medicine, not a lot, but when I need it, I probably take less than one a week. Just recently, she said, I want you to go to a spine specialist. So I went and saw him, he took x-rays, and I tried to read it and decipher it. And now I'm waiting for an MRI, which I got to wait 3 months because I have a pacemaker. And even that doctor who's at St. Luke's, Aurora, a spine specialist, I said, can't you move it up? He says, no. Very few places do MRIs on people with pacemakers. And so they're booked solid. I can't get you in sooner. I said, okay, fine. I don't expect any magic. I just have to live with it. So there you are. That was my experience. Now, I was in with all college graduates pretty much, so everybody was about 20, 22, 3, 4, and National Guard. So from everything I've heard, that was the simplest, easiest type of thing one could do in the armed forces or the service, compared to Army, Marines, and all those other kinds of basic training.
How was, since you were talking about like your medical issues?
Pardon?
You were talking about your medical issues around, like, how was like healthcare, like how was the system back then? Because we learned that like the socialists try to help that out and get it more widespread. So like, was it like expensive back then? Was it like, did most people have it type thing? Like healthcare, if that makes sense.
I don't know if I'm understanding that. If you ask me about health care, I probably was spoiled from the standpoint my parents had whatever insurance, but when I worked at the printing company, my boss and I were on the same wavelength to have health insurance that employees could go any place they wanted. So we did not ever have an HMO or PPO. And even though they came knocking at our door, I nicely put them off, and we were willing to pay the extra money to have what we had. But we both grew up that way. So even to this day, now on Medicare, I choose a supplement plan. It costs, between my wife and I, $800 a month, so $10,000 a year for a premium. However, we go wherever we want to, no questions asked. And secondly, I know what some of the bills were a few years ago with some heart work, pacemaker, blah, 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 my wife's knees fixed. Some years, it's pretty astronomical what they are. And people that stay pretty healthy and go to some less costly programs, might do well. Does that answer what you're?
Yeah.
So now here's the other side of it. Our kids, I don't hear too much. Nobody grumbles very much about it, but I do know this. Our third son, Pete, 52, he's a CPA and a CFP. He's got his own business, investments. He's in Brookfield. He was telling me his insurance plan, $10,000 deductible, incredible premiums, because he's not in any group. He's alone. Greg, who just started his own law practice, or went on his own at 54, same deal. He just paid mega bucks. I mean, way more than we pay. But, so that's unfortunate, and that would remind me of high school and college tuition going up like this years ago, and then people's wages went up 2, 3, 4%, 8%. So medical costs have kind of done that. They just, when you guys get older, I don't know what situation we'd have, what type of coverage in the country, and what's the best.
What differences did you experience in the variety of neighborhoods you lived in West Allis?
What?
What differences did you experience
Oh.
when you moved around West Allis?
Okay, 85th Street in West Allis, until age 12, we lived there, was a totally residential neighborhood. We had a playground a block away, walking distance, bike riding distance. And I contrast that with 55th Street, where my dad had the furnace business. That was zoned, I guess, industrial. I don't know if it's commercial. I don't know the difference. Probably industrial, because there were small factories right in the neighborhood. Now, there were some big companies 2, 3 blocks east of that, like Wisconsin Motors, for instance, was right there. And the hardware store I worked at was 3 blocks from home on 58th and Burnham. So I met a lot of men that worked at Alice Chalmers in the 50s, and they were really busy. And as I say, there was a lot of small factories around there. Really not the same kind of, no playgrounds, maybe Washington on 60th and Lapham. But less playgrounds, more commercial, industrial properties. But by then, at 12 and older, we were riding our bikes a lot and going down to Jackson Park quite often and doing things as we got older that we weren't going to the playgrounds. I guess it was a different style that we were.
And then you talked about there was like a lot of factories around your area and all that. Did you have any people who worked there and were eventually laid off? Because we learned that deindustrialization was a big part of the city.
Say that again a little slower.
Did you know of any people that used to work in the factories and were eventually laid off because we learned that deindustrialization was a big part of the city after the wars and all that?
No, after the war, the late 40s, and especially the 50s, were really good years economically. Inflation was almost nothing. For instance, at the hardware store, 1956, when we marked prices on stuff with a marker, like a hammer, we didn't have Japanese products then. That came a little later. So we had all pretty good stuff, Stanley Tools, Black & Decker, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of products we had one grade. We didn't have two or three, like good, better, and best. So what I remember is I was marking $5 on the hammer for 3, 4, 5 years. No increase. I got $2 an hour all those years. I think men at Allis-Chalmers maybe got $2.50 an hour. But the nice thing was, in summer I worked 56 hours. No, 6 days, Friday night. So I didn't get overtime, but at $2, I got over $100 a week. And that's probably what a lot of men worked for in factories. And so I never heard, well, I probably wouldn't have heard of layoffs and stuff. I did hear of Allis-Chalmers going down, but that was later, not right then, maybe 60s. But I think right after the war years, people were busy. And some women started working. In fact, you read some of that in the late 40s, some marvelous things they did. And there probably were still a lot of prejudices too. So.
What are your thoughts on the changes that were brought about by the building of the interstate system around Milwaukee?
Well, I know there was a lot of relocation, dislocation, and very unfortunate, but I also realize that happens in a lot of areas, has over the years, I should say. Then unfortunately, we've had some in Milwaukee that just didn't finish, and so they bought some land and people moved. It reminds me of what happened down by the big company on the come in Pleasant Prairie. There's a good example. I just read something recently about all the lawsuits going on, and the politicians that steered that stuff, they're all gone. And now all these people, too many of them really got hurt. Now, if they got paid enough money, okay. But I think the same thing with the interstates when they went through like Portrait Field, where my wife lived right across the street. And then when the freeway went down there, I don't know enough about what happened to people that I never really read about it or did any kind of research on it myself. But I suspect that there's always going to be some that are pretty much hurt by that. Probably like companies moving, laying off people permanently, closing factories, that kind of stuff. It just impacts the economics adversely. And I'm sure that the freeways did some of that. Well, I mean, even the big project out by the zoo, where we live, or downtown, you know, a certain number of businesses and homes had to get affected by that. I don't know that there's any answer. A current one, which I would be against, is widening Interstate 94 for a short distance. So it seems to me what they're saying is, we'll have 3 lanes, 3 for 2-3 miles. And I thought, what are you accomplishing? Especially if you come back down. And even aside from the mega bucks involved, a lot of money, just the concept of doing that. Now, some other people might say, yeah, well, Bob, you know what? If we don't do it in 50 years or 40 in the future, with expansion of population, if that happens, will really be behind the 8 ball. It'd be so behind the times. And I don't know what the answer is. When I drive on the freeway, which I do a lot out by our house, outside of getting over so many lanes so fast from Watertown Plank Road, I thought that's terrible. But aside from that, that's really a big, marvelous development when I think about it. So I guess that's the price we pay to an extent.
What kind of position did you take during the civil rights movement and the riots?
What kind of what did I take?
What kind of like position, or like did you
Oh.
participate in anything at all during this time?
No, I didn't. I guess I have always thought the people certainly that are getting squashed, the minorities, race-wise, really have valid points. And it's really tough for them to get much change. You do a lot of things, going back to Dr. King. All the things that people did and sacrificed nonviolently. And I think to myself, man, you could cry over the slowness, the change, and then all of a sudden go backwards. And when I read about some of that over the years, I don't read a lot of it. I don't tend to read that stuff in the paper anymore. I used to read more. And so why am I reading this? It's the same old thing. It's squashing people. It's mistreating. I was reading a little bit about the people trying to come across the border. And when I hear some adults talk, I've always thought there's so many adults get so vicious about the whole subject matter. And then all of a sudden I'm reading about a lot of, I did that like history at Marquette High. I can't get enough of it now. So what do I read about? The people that came in the United States way back, our forefathers, they're from all over the place. They weren't white Americans, no way. You know, Irish, Germans, blacks, yellow, all different colors. Well, when I read some comments by some people in authority that I consider really bad news, really hitting below the belt, I think, why is it taking us so long? And it really is. And I do think so many people just can't get over that hurdle. It's kind of like that January, 6th stuff in Washington. A lot of those people, if you listen to them, first of all, I don't think they have jobs. I don't think they're working class people. They're rebel relatives. But to hear some of them talk at 50, 60 years old is scary. You know? So I don't know. I just hope, I guess that's all I could do, that over time, it's a long time, there'll be some improvement. But the older I get, the more I think about the story, not the story, the comment, you'll always have the poor with you, and I guess maybe that puts me in a little different thought process. We're just going to have certain things going on in society that probably aren't going to change very much. We just have to do what we can.
And then talking more about what you were talking about the riots, do you remember like the prevalence that had like on your community, like were you guys kind of like staying inside more, or were you guys like still kind of living life a little normally during that time? Like during the riots?
I didn't get that.
During the
My
riots,
ears are old.
during the riots, like
Yeah.
what prevalence did that have in like your community? Like were you guys inside a lot during that time, or were you guys still kind of like?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't probably answer that very well. Getting back to that in the 60s, I never have participated in any walks or anything or rallies. Secondly, I read about it, like when we went across the viaduct to the south side, or Father Grappi. a little bit I read about Father Grappi, for instance, I would always have been a supporter. I wouldn't have gotten so upset about him like a lot of people did, but that's true of a lot of, like Martin Luther King and others. Secondly, I guess it was a little scary when they were coming, some people marching were coming into neighborhoods, and then if some acted up, did damage, that's always unfortunate that some do that. But I don't think they're the ones that are really behind the cause. I think they're just troublemakers. And I don't know what the answer is with that. Because I think a lot of people that are marching are not troublemakers. And then a few can spoil it. I remember at Marquette High, we'd be sitting here in Latin class. I was a naughty boy sometimes. Latin, I forget his name, collecting money in the morning. So if I put a penny on my book from the back seat, when he'd have his back to us, bang, off the backboard. Well, he let a certain amount of that go because we all were chipping in money for the collections, okay? Once in a while, though, he'd had somebody card. But the thing was, when those people were marching, and I think in a lot of cases, if a lot of people did that and didn't start trouble, they were pretty peaceful, or could be. And I often wondered, though, well, if this had been going on for 50 years, most of my life, 60 years, why do we seem to be in the same situation countrywide? I mean, I don't know who could measure that, but if I were to make a guess, I would probably say, what did we improve, 1% or 2%? I think pretty small. And a lot of it because of the laws. If we don't have the laws, then I think what it's not related to the racing, but driving. What I've noticed is people driving in the city so much faster, and I see a lot more going through red lights. Really flagrant at big intersections. So I've adopted waiting 1 or 2 seconds before I go when I get the green light, especially at big intersections. And when I see that, I think, is it a big rush? Is that what the problem is? People are in such a hurry. A lot of them are distracted, of course, doing something else. You know what? Phones. I can't tell you how many times in the last 2, 3, 4 years I'm at a light and somebody's playing with their phone and the light turns and they're just until you beep a horn. You just see that a lot. So I guess I call those all discourteous, and I think the answer is we got to get parents to teach their kids. Like, let's say our daughter Ann, or when you guys are driving, hopefully somebody is teaching you some of that stuff, courtesies. Not just fasten the seatbelt, but you know, this is a big machine you're driving here. You got to be careful. So now Ryan, 16, Ann's oldest, I don't know what his parents say. I can only hope that whatever we taught them, they pass on. Hopefully good stuff.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your experiences at the Eagles Club, like when you were in high school with like bowling?
Oh, I didn't do anything else at the Eagles Club except we bowl there. And I never attended anything else, maybe once, and I vaguely remember. So I didn't have any other involvement there. And I don't know that anybody else did from high school. My younger brother was on the swimming team at Marquette 8 years younger than me. And I don't know if they swam at the Eagles or I used to hear about an auditorium, but I don't know where that was. So I didn't have any other involvement at the Eagles.
Is there any other topics you want to discuss?
No,
You can go.
yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say, since we're talking about like your high school years, can you talk more about like your job and like what you did there and all that?
Oh, yeah,
So,
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I would add this. Some people have asked me, how would you compare Marquette High to Marquette U? Because I know some fellas who were like this with the U and not the high school, and vice versa. I was always very close to Marquette High, never the U. And it's probably because I didn't do my best as a student till older years, and a few of the Jesuit priests kind of took me by the side, on the side, and we chatted, and so everything worked out. Plus, I guess it was being smaller than the university, the factor. Now, as far as work, I mentioned I learned a lot in those 3 years, and by that I mean I would get in charge of some jobs after 1 year, year and a half, smaller companies, that somebody at the big firms might wait 2-3 years, because if they went and audited a big corporation, they might work on one little area for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And we didn't have real big companies like that to audit, so I would see a lot more stuff sooner. And that was one thing I liked working at the printing company. A smaller business was always my cup of tea, because I saw a lot of parts of it. It'd probably be like a general practitioner versus a specialist in medical, although it's kind of gone that way with a lot of people. But the doctor my wife and I go to, she's an internist, and so that would be, if I was doing that kind of work, that's what I would prefer myself. So I saw a lot of facets at work and worked on a lot of stuff with different bosses. Buying equipment, capital expenditures, how much should we change the pay rates this year? We had a non-union company, we worked hard at that. I mentioned the insurance. We tried to keep really good health insurance for the employees. Charge them a fair amount, which we pretty well did. They paid about 20% of the cost, which was kind of the average, according to surveys that we checked. And so I got to know the employees real well in a smaller company like that. We had about 80 in New Berlin and 50 in Minnesota. At one time we had a company in California, right by the old Rose Bowl. So, and I really look forward to going to work, and any day, the agreement my wife and I had was I'd be home by 6. And I couldn't tell you how many times, 2 minutes to 6. She'd answer, guess where I am? Bob? One day was the worst. She said, if you come home without stopping at the store and getting a new clothesline, don't even come home. Because I had the clothes out on the line in the backyard, and the clothesline broke and they fell in the mud. Slam. But we kind of worked it out, but I went through a while where I'd be doing stuff, and it was more like fun, not work. The nature of it. But as I say, I had a lot of variety. It wasn't that I crunching numbers all day. I was just doing a lot of different things. So we kind of worked that out over the years. But for a while there, when the kids were little, and that clothesline broke, I had to toe the mark a little better. But I used to hear people talk that worked at some jobs that they hated it, and that would be sad. My dad used to tell us 6 boys growing up, especially the older ones, like me and my brother. You got to do, when I started in high school and college, you got to do three things. You got to have the right religion, if you get married, the right spouse, and the right job. Keep them in that order. But I thought of that many times. And so there was a lot to that, I thought. But I heard way too many people over the years complain about work, and I thought, oh, would that be a drudgery to go every day and not like it? That'd be sad. Now that's a whole other thing, the rapid change in employment and what people are doing and the nature of so many jobs, how much it's changed, with technology changes. That's just a lot of change. But presumably you fellows are equipped for that, just as you're in all this technology. I guess I think of our grandkids, even younger people, coming along with what they're learning and adapting. So it'd be interesting.
Alright, so again, talk about like the early years. Did you ever have like a kind of like a corner store like in your community?
Hey, what?
Like a store that was based around your community? Because we learned that instead of having like major like grocery shops and all that, there was usually like a corner store or something like that that would have everything you would need for your community. Like, if that makes sense.
No. Well, that was a big change from when we lived on 85th Street. We had a corner grocery store, Nibby's, 84th, a block away. We go to Coaster Wagon, buy whatever my mom told us. And but when I think about it, those were small stores to grocery stores. I can't even think of any grocery stores that small nowadays. Well, for instance, milk, one kind of milk, probably white bread. I don't know if they had wheat bread. Cheerios, Wheaties, cornflakes. Not too much more than that. One of each. So things were simpler that way, and we didn't have Kohl's and A&P and Kroger and all the big places. That came later. And now, if you were talking about community store, is that what you were
I
meaning?
was talking about like more we were talking about like a little like
Oh, okay.
like neighborhood store.
Yeah. Well, drugstores were the same way. Now, when I had the job at the hardware store, my real good friend Ronnie worked at a drugstore in the neighborhood. My brother worked at a drugstore 3 blocks away. Again, those were the small stores. There were no chains. I suppose there was Walgreens. I don't remember that, if there was. But that was pretty common. A lot of fellows in high school worked at small places like that. Especially drugstores, real common. Oh, and then a lot of them had soda fountains. Some kids got jobs doing that. You got a film?
And then, alright, if we're talking about stores now, you talked about stores that were down on Mitchell Street.
Yeah.
How was all that like? How was like that area? If that makes sense. Like,
How was what?
Like that downtown area, like Mitchell Street and all that, like with all those stores. Like, did you guys go there often? And what would you guys do there when you went?
Oh, well, before shopping centers, Mayfair, Southgate, in the late 40s, early 50s, if you wanted to get stuff from a department store, either clothes or my mom did a lot of sewing, my wife does a lot of sewing, you'd probably have to go to those kind of stores. I don't know if there was a lot in, like, say, West Allis. And the other thing is there might be 2 or 3 stores you could visit on Mitchell Street, or the other place, Schuster's, I think it was 3rd Street on the north side that we used to go on the bus. And I don't remember how often we went. If I made a guess, I'd say once a month or something like that. I don't know if we went any more than that. I don't think so. Speaking of sewing, my wife had a sewing machine when we were dating. Over the years, she bought a real good one, many years ago, still has it. And we have 5 children and 5 children-in-law, their wives or husbands, spouses, who periodically ask my wife if you could fix this, because none of them sew. And I said, honey, what are they going to do someday when you're in heaven and you don't have a sewing machine handy to sew, blah, blah, whatever it is. I guess it's a lost art, I think. Now, what's that related to? I don't know, that's for you to figure out. Is it people don't take the time, don't want to learn how to do that, or just go buy something? But my wife, she used to make a lot of the kids' pants when kids were out the knees, lickety split over and over and over and over and over, and she'd patch those. And then I think part of it, like my mom, a lot of it was maybe fun besides the economics of learning that stuff. So, and then when Southgate opened, I don't know, sometime in the 50s, I suppose, before Mayfair. Southgate was the first. We went down there occasionally too.
So we're gonna ask about, since you said you liked ice skating, like how was that like? Cause you talked about going to like the malls like later and like going ice skating there and all that. How was that like? What experience did you have doing that?
Well, I didn't ice skate too much at the mall at Mayfair. We mainly took our kids there. The other place we went more frequently than there was Lagoons, which my wife and I did when we were dating. We'd go to Jackson Park, north side, a couple parks that had lagoons, and we'd ice skate there outside. And then we did that with our kids later years. A popular one was Greenfield Park. We would skate for a while, go in the building, warm up, come back out, and we did that a lot. Now, when our 3 kids that are out of state come into town, they like to go to the Pettit Center maybe once, like in winter, and rent skates. I don't think they have any. And then go skating, just once. But we used to skate a lot, frequently. Again, we started doing so much of that, I can't say that enough. We started doing so much of that before TVs came out in the 40s. What should we do? Ice skate, ice skate, ice skate. Roller skate, little bit of roller skate. Now, one thing we did, I was gonna tell you about it or put it in my notes. I don't think so. Roller skate. On 85th Street, probably in the mid to late 40s, we had a pretty good length basement, a bungalow house. And my mom was forever canning. She had a cellar, fruit cellar. And I remember, I can picture that, the wall was full of stuff. And a lot of mothers did that. We used to come skating down full speed. We didn't try to do it, but occasionally a jar would fall and crash. And I don't even know what we did, if we told my mom or not, but in later years when we reminisce, say, what did you kids think? You go in there the next day, it's clean. I pick it up. Mom does it. In fact, she said to me, she lived to be 85. My dad was 88. They died 14 days apart. 2003, a year after our 5.5-year-old grandson died. My mom said to me one day at Clement Manor, where they lived the last 5 years of their life, so she's probably well into her 70s. She said, hey Bob, what did you think? I said, what do you mean, Mom? You know that kitchen table we had on 55th Street? And you were 12, we moved there? Yeah. It had the pull-out drawer? Yeah. Well, if you kids didn't like something, what did you do when nobody's looking? Put it in the drawer. Like some of the vegetables. She said, the next day, that drawer was clean because I cleaned it out every night or whenever it happened. What the heck do you think? I said, I guess we didn't think. Oh my gosh. We got a lot of leeway, I would say that.
Earlier you told us a story about with your mom and Liberace.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us about that again?
Yeah. I didn't know this. He was born in West Allis. He moved to West Milwaukee. And he lived in West Milwaukee. Now, Kegel's Inn on 59th and National is, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 blocks from West Milwaukee. It's pretty close. So that part of West Allis is at the far east end of the city. So my mom said Liberace would sometimes, he was born, I think a year different than my mom. She was born in 1918. I think he was 17 or 19, because I saw that recently. Well, anyway, she said, thinking back, he was playing that piano, I mean, pretty much all day. Instead of baseball and ice skating and whatever else we did, he was playing the piano. As the years went by, TV and Liberace made the big time and wore those suits, or costumes, I should say, that he wore. When we were probably teenagers, we would tease her about it, and she would want to watch the show on TV. One of the few things she would watch. And we finally, I guess, kept our mouth shut and stopped teasing her. But for a while there, now what years were those? Oh, I would guess mid to late 50s probably, and I don't remember when he died. But I lived at home until 66, so it was sometime mid to late 50s and early 60s that he was as popular as he was. And just his mannerisms and the way he talked, well, that would get us going, laughing. We thought that was pretty funny. But a lot of those people, athletes, musicians, they were spending so many hours, which I didn't know at the time, at their chosen occupation or profession or sport or whatever you want to call it, countless hours to get where they were. But he certainly was a big success story, I guess, coming from West Allis, West Milwaukee, to get where he did.
Is there any other things that you want to talk about? Because we're kind of nearing the end, I believe.
No, I think when I look at what I jotted down, thinking about this over the last couple weeks, and yesterday and today, spending some more time thinking, I think I pretty much covered what I told you today. There might be a few little things here and there that I didn't think of, but I don't think too much. And as I say, I thought Marquette High versus the university was so rewarding, maybe more to me than a lot of other people, just because of the road I traveled. Now, I would say, and I wish I wouldn't have told you, I had my fair share of mischief at age 14. It was not a good year for me. But I got over it. I changed my friends. My mom said, Bob, you gotta stop hanging around with certain kids. And so that was high school starting. And so, as I say, I got a few breaks from people, including the police officers, and turned things around. So I think I have had a little more patience with our kids when they get some troubles in high school, either drinking or whatever. At earlier ages than when I grew up, things were a lot tougher. And then the next generation, it's more dangerous stuff that you hear about, drugs. But I think, it's really sad, and no magic answer, but as I say, I got a few breaks along the way. Even in school, when I went to Marquette, I had to go part-time for a while because my grades, I got that straightened out. And when I applied to graduate school, the admissions man said, Bob, you did really well on the entrance exam, but your grades weren't that great for graduate school. In undergraduate, I said, well, I was starting real slow, real low. It took me a long time. So he said, well, we'll let you in, but you got to go part-time for a year or a semester. So I did. And then I got with the program. But then I was a lot older, so I was buckling down. So when I hear, if I've heard, I have, some children, like when I was coaching a lot of baseball in Wauwatosa, Postal Baseball League, for 8 years, coached. When I would hear kids talk about, I can't do that, or I can't do that, or I can't get into that school, or I'd say, wait a minute. And then I would encourage people to try, first of all, and maybe go part-time, maybe go in on a reduced schedule, whatever, something to get in, so to speak. Our one son, Andy, one daughter is a junior at Notre Dame, and the other one's a freshman at different school. The older one just had one eye removed. She's got an illness that gets tumors on her spine and her brain. So she had surgery 4 years ago. And something went wacko, had something on her eye. Make a long story short, she's going to get a prosthesis, which my wife has. And so Toby, when she was applying for college, our son Andy on the phone said to me, Dad, Toby applied to 10 colleges at $75 each, $750. And one of them was Notre Dame. And I said, what are you doing that for? Guess what? Toby got a full scholarship to Notre Dame. That's like $50,000 a year. And how did she get it? She's very active in school and top student. She got the Lilly scholarship from the Lilly Corporation in Indiana. And I guess, if I remember, one student from each county got it in the state, as long as you go to school in the state. So after that happened, I said to Andy, and you grumbled about her applying to Notre Dame. You just never know. So she just had this surgery 2 weeks ago. So she dropped out of school because she was a little bit behind. She's had a lot of pain. And it takes a long time to heal till she get a prosthesis. So she dropped out of school, talked to the people at Notre Dame, and they said, well, you know what? You're ahead of schedule. You can still graduate on time next year. Take 2 classes in summer school, and you'll be right up to snuff. Fortunate. But at the time when this was going on, I couldn't even imagine what's going through her mind. terrible stuff maybe, the uncertainty. And then she was so concerned because everybody and their uncle was asking her, Toby, what's the matter with your eye? In the last many months, just because appearance. My dear wife said to me, after we had been dating for a long time, well, we were dating for 1.5 years till we got married, she said to me one day, are you staring at my eye? I said, what? I'm 25 years old. I said, what? That's when she told me. She had an accident at age 2, playing a game with a bottle, and it broke and hit her in the eye. She didn't get it fixed till, and I guess you can't right away. You literally got to wait like girls, or you get older. And she was about 16 when she got a prosthesis. So I'd seen pictures of her injured eye when she was young, and she took a lot of abuse, she said. She never talked about it, but I'd hear her telling somebody in later years, and I'd think, oh my gosh. But anyway, that day she said to me, because she's got a really good match, and unless she's real tired, you would never notice it. And some of my siblings never knew that for many years after we were married, when they found out that she had an artificial eye. Really? So hopefully Toby will get squared away with whatever they devise and get on with stuff. She may go on to school after Notre Dame, I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, my point of that was, I've heard a number of kids talk about stuff that they don't think they can accomplish this or do that or whatever, and need some encouragement is what they need. A boost.
I think we are all good now.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it, meeting you fellas. And I don't really know what your program is at school here, but I'm sure there's an example of something new that we didn't have when I went to school. Just the whole concept. So when you first called, Bryce, I thought, oh, well, that's totally new. I would have never thought of something like that. Why would I? And I thought, just a good additional learning experience, I guess, for everybody. And there's probably a lot of that goes on nowadays in schools in terms of different kinds of classes and programs that are offered. Not just English, foreign language, chemistry, those things. So thank you also.